They buried me in the water and I came out new. Now I'm baptized in blue.
Welcome to the Officer Autumn podcast, the only podcast designed specifically for female cops in mind. I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. So I found this soap company that's Leo owned, and they make women soap and men soap. And here's why this is important. There's a lot of excellent homemade and handmade and all natural soap, but they don't make men and women's soap. And so I found this company. It's called Patriot and Co. Highly suggest you look it up and check them out. I have a whole box of their soap that they sent me, and my favorite one is called American Woman. It's pink, smells amazing. I've been washing with Beautiful Badass. That's really nice too. They have a Whiskey Girl one that I really like. Anyways, go check it out. They also have scents for men. But I wanted to just give them a quick shout out on here because I wanted to tell you about that because, look, we're ladies. We need to know the companies that are doing things for us. Hey, what's up, everybody? So today is going to be an episode that's pretty quick, to the point, but quite educational because I had a request. A listener would love to know some inspiring books that they can read or listen to. And I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about how important it is that you are listening to like Audible books or YouTubes or, educational podcasts, especially when you're in your cruiser. We spend a lot of time as police officers in our cars, right? Minimum 40 hours a week, but Lord knows it's way the fuck more than that, right? And I want you to really understand that if you are listening to something like educational, then you can actually essentially get a fucking degree. Within like 2 years, you could probably get what's equivalent to a bachelor's degree in some sort of education by listening to, things that will feed your mind versus just music or, some sort of bubblegum for your mind bullshit. You want to be, focused on what you're putting into your brain. And I will tell you that's been a big key to my success as I've hit, my extreme low, especially, when I got injured on duty and had to stop being a police officer. That was obviously very devastating for me. And a couple of things that saved me was that I was already doing what I'm telling you. And the reason I was already doing it is because I became a Beachbody coach. And they pushed personal development. And so I had about a year of, listening to personal development in my cruiser and really helping me to shape my mind, which was important because when you hit one of the hardest, things in your life to ever happen to you, when you face that and you don't have like a solid mindset, it's really bad. People go down really bad roads. And I was very fortunate that, the universe had my back and guided me, and I listened, right? And I listened, and I did listen to things that were inspiring to me and that were helping me grow my mind. Obviously, you listening to this podcast is definitely very educational. It's my opinion on a lot of things, but it's definitely, I'd say, more of a coaching podcast. You're going to leave with new insights, tools, tips, tricks, advice, which is definitely helpful. So you want to be listening to more podcasts like this, books, YouTubes, whatever you can get your hands on that is going to help expand and grow your mind. So I'm going to just share with you some of my favorite podcasts, some of my favorite books, people to follow. Now, there's two people who really got me out of my depression when I was, hit my rock bottom, was bedridden couch-ridden. I wasn't bedridden. I could get out of bed, but I was couch-ridden essentially for 6 months because I couldn't do anything because of my back. Two people really got me out of bed. And the first person is Tony Robbins. So Tony, luckily, he puts out so much free content that like you don't really have much to Like, you don't have to worry about much because you don't have to go far. Because that's what I did. I just YouTubed him, and he's got enough content out there, until the cows come home. He also has a really great Netflix. It's a documentary, and it's called I'm Not Your Guru. I've watched that minimum of probably 10 times, and I've recommended all of my clients watch it. Because you see him coaching in action, and there's just so much a person can take from that. So I do recommend that. The other person that got me out of bed was, it really inspired me, and she inspired me prior to me getting hurt, but nevertheless helped me a bunch, was Gabby Bernstein. Now, politically, her and I do not align. She sees things much differently than me. But I can set that aside, and I'm hoping you might be able to too, because her spirituality is, and how she believes, the universe really has our back, and how we can co-create with the universe, and that we're not alone in this experience called life. And, just the way that her teachings are excellent. She has a podcast. I don't love her podcast straight up. That isn't what I listen to, but I do have most of her books, and I do read most of her books. And I have them on Audible, and I highly recommend a book. Like, I'll tell you, the book that for her that is very life-changing for me is called The Universe Has Your Back. And it's a book I highly recommend everybody listen to, because again, it just talks about and shows how, like, everything that we go through really truly there's purpose to it all. So I think that's really important. The next, and she's got another book called Super Attractor, which I really loved. I go back and forth with those. And she has a ton, like Judgment Detox. She's got another one. I mean, she's got like 7 best-selling books. And she just put out another one at Happy Days. And I bought that too. So, I mean, but you can go to her Instagram and her YouTube. And I mean, you can really listen to a bunch of shit for free before you go buy a book. So Gabby Bernstein's, she's high on my list. David Goggins, his book, You Can't Hurt Me. Obviously, that is definitely one of my favorite books. Very powerful. David is very in the masculine energy of just fucking push and do it. And I'm going to be honest, when it comes to me in my life and my personal development, I ebb and flow with that, because I do believe in that. You do need to work really hard to get whatever it is you want in life. And I want you to know I believe that, but I also believe that you want to go with the flow as far as like the universe. Like, don't think you're doing it all by yourself. And like, that's where like Gabby Bernstein's teachings come in, and other people like Dr. Wayne Dyer. He's passed now, but he's a very spiritual teacher, and he studied a bunch of different like spiritual teachings, and he kind of combined them into his own way. And you can YouTube him for free, and he has like audiobooks on YouTube for free, and he's like, you can listen to him, and he's really good. I like him too. So, I really find myself in the mix, combining both ways, because again, I do believe in working your face off, but I also believe in like working with the universe. And I think people like get that twisted. I think people like, I just don't agree with just, I'm going to hustle, and I'm going to work really hard, but I'm not going to co-create with the universe. I just don't agree with it. So, but that's me. You know what I mean? That's my belief. I've, spent my entire life. My mother's a shaman, which is a very high level, spiritual teacher who, so I grew up essentially like talking to my guardian angels, knowing that I have guardian angels. My imaginary friends weren't, my mother knew that they were my angels. And it was a very, the conversations in my household growing up were very, unconventional and spiritual, and they still are. And it's just how the family is. And so, I know the universe has my back. I know like everything's working out for me. And that's how I choose to look at things and work my ass off to create what I'm here to do in this world. So that, like, my list is very like people in their feminine and then people in their masculine. And what that means is the hustle and the flow. So David Goggins, I highly recommend. I like Jocko. I have Jocko's book. He's got a book on leadership. I have that Audible. And then I've got his actual book. And I can't remember what it is, but it's some black book. I cannot remember what it is for the life of me right now. But I like Jocko. I like more of his motivational stuff. His podcast put me to sleep. But that's just because they're really long form. But I love Jocko. I think he's great. Let's see. Who else do I listen to? I love Gary Vaynerchuk. You can look him up on Instagram, YouTube, all across the platforms. He's everywhere. He's got multiple books out. He's a business guru, self-made, multimillionaire, came from nothing. But what I like about him too is he also is like sharing with you how like kindness is how we get ahead and empathy is how we get ahead. And it's not cutting each other down at the knees. And it's, in order to build the biggest fucking building in town, we don't need to knock down anybody else's building. We just, you know what I mean? We just keep growing and building our own stuff. And his messages are very powerful. So even if you're not an entrepreneur, he's very powerful. Who else do I listen to? What are the books? Well, to be honest with you, there's this is pretty recent. So there is on Netflix, there is a documentary. It's an interview. It's a 45-minute long interview of Oprah interviewing Viola Davis. And Viola Davis is a famous actress. She happened to be the star in one of my absolute favorite ever series, which is How to Get Away with Murder. She was Annalise Keating. And Viola talks about herself. And that documentary inspired me to buy hers, which is called Finding Me. And I'm still working my way through it. I have it on Audible. And I really am enjoying that. I'm a huge fan of studying like the best people in the world and how they got there. So if we go down that road, Matthew McConaughey has a book called Green Lights, and I highly fucking recommend it. I got the Audible because you can listen to him read it, and it's just superb. I've listened to it twice. I fucking love it. It is so good. I bought 50 cents. 2 years ago, I had this mastermind, and it was called the Resilient First Responder, I think that's what I called it. Anyways, I had a group of about 10 first responders, and we read books, and we studied books, and we coached, and we did group coaching, and it was really fun, and it was really great. And I kind of feel like maybe we need to do that again. But I had them read 50 Cent's book, Hustle Smarter, Not Harder. And it was really good. It was really good because it was kind of the streets, because he's legit like gangster, right? And it meets, the business world and success. And he talks about these principles that I just think that so important. And as first responders, I just think it's important that like you study and understand the different like cultures and subcultures within your patrol, and understand the people like who do live differently than you and come from these different backgrounds, and how hard it can be, and so that when you're out and you're dealing with these people, like you understand. I'm not telling you to like put your guard down, but like you need to fucking understand like where these people come from and why they are the way they are, and maybe why they're talking the way that they talk, especially if you're not from around there and you just can't even fathom and understand it. Instead of looking down on them, why don't you try to understand them? And I think that's really important. And 50 Cent's book really helped me personally with that. But I also study hip hop, and I study, I study, that kind of culture. And I also study different things because I enjoy trying to learn and understand about different cultures and why people are the way they are, in different backgrounds. That's very fascinating to me. So, another documentary that I highly recommend is Michael Jordan. I actually have a fucking whole entire episode on Michael Jordan and his documentary, The Last Dance. And if you're into watching the best people in the world and how they get there, like this, there's nothing like this documentary. He's just on this other fucking level. Kobe Bryant is in it, before he passed, which is just, if you're a basketball fan, man, there's nothing better than that. So I do highly, highly recommend that. And let's see, what other books do I love? Okay, so I'm a big fan of Andy Frisella. He is the founder and owner of First Form, which is a supplement company, but you'll see a lot of sponsored athletes and a lot of people work out and take their supplements. And but he has this podcast, and it's called the Real AF. Andy Frisella Real AF podcast. It's one of the number one podcasts in the world, and he's fucking excellent. I love him. Very pro, he's pro law enforcement, but he's very pro America, and he's pro get your fucking ass out there and do something. But he also tells you how to do it and shit. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of his podcast. And his partner, he's got a partner in a program. They're not business partners in any other thing except one program called Arte Syndicate, which is a mastermind it's a business program that they hold. But his partner his name is Ed Milet. Now, Ed is a self-made multi-millionaire. He owns 5 fucking jets, and he happened to just buy a fucking island in my state, which is Maine, which was kind of a fun fact. But Ed just put out a book. I like Ed's podcast. I like Andy's better. I like Ed's podcast, but Ed just put out a book called One More. And I'm reading it, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is life-changing. It's a fucking excellent book. I highly recommend that. I bought the actual book, and then I bought the audio book, and I'll do that with books I really love. Another book I highly recommend, and I actually interviewed the author of this book in 2020, I think, in 2020, maybe 2019. Maybe it's been that long. It might be 2019. I also want to circle back around and tell you, I had Gabby Bernstein on the podcast. It was a big honor. So you can go listen to her book. But I listened to another book. I would check that. Amanda Francis, I had her on the podcast, but she wrote a book called Rich as Fuck. And it's literally a guide, step by step, on how she's a self-made millionaire, multi-millionaire, mega, almost brings in $1 million a month. And she comes from a little town in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, and outside of Sand Springs, Oklahoma, I think. And she just walks you through her story and how she literally did this, step by step, and how she looks at things, and she really just shares with you the energy behind money. And here's why I think this is important, because again, it's mixing that masculine, with the feminine, and the hustling and the not. And it's just this really great way of looking at money. I bought the book, I bought the Kindle, I bought her audio, and I have probably bought the book for all of my clients. And the girls in my high level mentorship, so I have a mentorship, it's ongoing. It's pretty exclusive because it is decently expensive. And the girls in there, we study that all the time. We study her concepts. We study the book because it's that fucking good. Because it's that life-changing. Like, if you can study these concepts and you can really understand them, like, you're going to change your life. And the girls do, like, we all get, like, we study it, we apply these principles, and then we get good results, like, right after working her stuff. So I highly recommend that. Now, again, she's very feminine. She has political views I do not agree with, but I gotta be honest with you and tell you, I'm fucking way over that shit. If somebody has something really good to say and I like it, like, I don't really care what their political agenda or political view is. If the information's good and I like it, I'm gonna listen to it. So let's see. I interview on this podcast Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. Now, if you don't know who he is, he's a very important person in law enforcement. He wrote the book, The Emotional Survival of Law Enforcement. It's a book I highly recommend, but last I knew it was sold out, so I don't know if you can still get it. I had him on my podcast, and he essentially on the podcast gave us the sequel to that book, The Emotional Survival of Law Enforcement. He'll tell you why you're feeling everything that you're feeling. He's going to tell you how to prepare for the job emotionally. He was a police officer for 20 years. He retired in Arizona. Then he went on to become a doctor. I think he's a psychologist, but don't quote me on it. But I know he's a doctor, and he has helped, law enforcement, I think for the last 20 years, survive emotionally. He goes out and he teaches. I think his book is in academies all across the country. It's a great book. And he is somebody that you want to get to know. So I do recommend that. I interviewed Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, and he wrote a lot of books, but he wrote a book that I read that was called On Combat. Now, that's where the term sheepdog comes from. He talks about the analogy of sheepdogs, and I'm going to give it to you in case you don't know it. So basically what he says is that there are three kinds of people in the world. There are the sheep, and that's just regular civilians who just want to live their fucking life, who are kind of put their head down. They don't want to look at criminals. They don't want to deal with anything bad. They just want to, be, members of society, and they want to do their thing. And then there's the sheepdogs, and the sheepdogs, they're the ones who are like us. They train to fight. They train to protect the flock, i.e. the sheep. They go out, they hunt, for predators, etc. And the predators, which would be the third type of people in the world, are wolves. And the wolves feed off the sheep. And so the sheepdogs are essentially fighting the wolves. And that's the analogy. And that's why you see, like, first responders, military, all, use that term sheepdog. Although it got a negative connotation as, like, somewhere down the line, because I think people were like, I am the sheepdog and I hunt the evil. And then some guys didn't really like that, and they started busting on that and this and that. And like, people bust on me too, because I'll use that term. But I use the term to just encompass everybody, because I needed a term to, like, when I first started doing what I'm doing, I needed a term to, like, fucking encompass everybody. So you'll hear me say that, like, what's up, sheepdogs, or what's up, Sheepdog Nation, blah, blah, blah. Because fun fact, when I first started my podcast 4 years ago, that's what it was called, was Sheepdog Nation. I never got my balls busted until this last year for it. So, but I really don't. Truthfully, I don't really give a fuck. But anyways, his book On Combat, I think, is really good. There's a book that was given to me by somebody who I worked with, and it was called The Gift of Fear. And it just talks about how, like, fear, if you can control fear and use it properly, it's actually a gift. And so, that's a good book, I guess. I didn't read the whole thing. I'm really big into personal development. So I like those books. But that's a really good book too. Let's see. I think that's about off the top of my head. Let's see, in one of my programs, I think it's a Lady Sheepdog Club, I actually have an entire list, a book list, of my favorite books. But this is covering it. This is pretty comprehensive. I really hope this was helpful. But again, I just want to end this episode telling you that, like, hey, be fucking proactive with what you're putting into your fucking brain for information. It's very fucking important, okay? Very, very important. So just don't underestimate that. And don't just numb your mind with music all the time, because we all do it. We've all done it, but it's not helping you get ahead. If you can start to shape your mind and create new thoughts, create new outlook, create new perspectives, that's going to be what gets you ahead. And I want to see you get ahead. If you guys have any other questions, let me know. If you're looking for some free training, go hit the link in my show notes. Got some free training for you. The Tactical Confidence free training. I got some free resources in there for female first responders. So make sure you go hit that up. And if you're not in the Facebook group, come into the Facebook group. And I'll see you next time.